Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a disassembly for you of this little knife right here. This is the Kizer Uprising by Kim Ning as the designer. And this is a really interesting blade for both good and for bad, and I'm curious to see what this guy looks like on the inside. Of course, though, before we go on, I gotta remind you that unfortunately Kizer's warranty is completely void if you take the knife apart to maintain it. That's ugly, that's not a good thing, and it's something I hope they change down the road. But it is true. So if you do this, you're running the risk of voiding your warranty. And the other thing to remember is that Kizer very often will use Loctite, and worse still, they will use relatively soft screws. So it's always a little bit more dangerous to take down a Kizer than other knives, and I think that's why they've got the warranty policy they do. But anyways, we're going to push ahead here because nothing ventured, nothing gained. And this is a relatively new knife, so it's not in dire straits, but nonetheless, it's good to be able to see what it looks like on the inside for the review. So let's jump into it here. This knife was actually sent to me directly from Kizer, and they've seen my other reviews, so they know I take things down. So maybe at some level they're okay with it. But I'm thinking Torx T10 here for this pivot. Maybe that's a little too big. And if you're hearing movies in the background, that would be the fiancé. So, worth saying, this guy actually came with some Loctite, so I had to heat it up a little bit using a hairdryer to pull that out. But once I did, everything's coming apart, no problem. Pulled out the pivot screw here. Now, no, these are T8, maybe T9? I'm not sure here. Let's see. Yeah, those are a T9 driver. T9's a little bit more unusual, and it's a little odd that they're using two different fastener sizes that close together, but hey, whatever. Maybe T8 would be a better choice here. T9's right at the edge, but I always tend to advocate going for a slightly bigger driver when you've got the option. But either way, both of these guys are popped out. I've got these screws arrayed in roughly the position they came out of the knife in, and this knife should now come apart. It might take a little bit of doing for you just because I suspect these back spaces, yeah, they got a little collar on them, so it'll take a little bit of flexing, so to speak, for them to pop off properly. Ah, come on, you little bugger. There we go. That was just this guy sliding off of there. It's a good sign of tolerances, manufacturing-wise, but yeah, there we go. And look, this is another very, very straightforward titanium frame lock from Kizer here. I'll describe it, but honestly, if you've seen a million of my disassembly videos, this isn't going to look so different to you. So, yeah, maybe I'll rant a little bit more as I'm doing this. A couple of things to point out here. It's using these newer bearings by Kizer. I haven't seen these guys on a lot of Kizer knives. These are brand new. These knives, I'm sorry, this guy and the flashbang are brand new to me from Kizer directly. So, maybe this is a brand new sort of bearing solution. Maybe not. But, so it's using these bearings, which are great. There went my stop pin. Whoa! Is that a hollow stop pin? Look at that. Stop pin on this guy is hollow. Weird. It's very weird. And it's screwed, too. Like, it's got places for screws, but they didn't... That seems a little weird. Why would you make your stop pin hollow with screw holes and not use them? Okay, they're probably just reusing parts. Actually, it'd be my bet. They made those stop pins for some other knife that needed the hollow, that did have things going into them, and then they just reused it here. I don't know how I feel about that. I mean, at some level, am I ever going to beat it up that much? No, probably not, but still. The other thing to point out is a stainless steel bearing race insert here. It's one of those things that's nice to see, but I don't consider it all a necessity. That should pop out, and it may well during the course of this disassembly, but if it doesn't pop out, I'm not at all concerned about that. Then the rest of this is just titanium. There's a lock bar insert, which is nice, although it's interestingly enough, the detent ball is pressed into the lock bar titanium. The insert is a separate affair. A little different than usual, pardon me. Gonna go ahead and clean off the blade here. These little made in China stickers drive me a little crazy. I get that regulatorily there may be reasons why they need to put those on there, but it just, you know, these knives are very nice. At a very real level, you take one of these out of the box and it feels like a quality tool, and I'm not just saying that. You know, there are better knives out there in the world, but then you take it out of the box though and you see this chintzy little made in China sticker on there, and it's like, yeah, that's, you gotta have a better solution for that. Put it on the inside of the scale or something. I don't know, but whatever. Just cleaning off the pivot here. So this knife came to me directly from Kizer. Like, they reached out to me sometime back and said, hey, Nick, do you want to take a look at some knives? And I actually, I read them the full, I got a little form letter I send out to manufacturers and makers who want to send me gear directly saying, you know, sure, I'd love to check it out, but I do the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly. And if there's ugly here, viewers are going to hear about it. And, you know, asking them to include return shipping and whatnot, and they insisted that I keep it. Which, okay, sure. But nonetheless, it's been interesting to me as I've been preparing to review this and the flashbang buddies over here, you know, figuring out how I'm going to play that. Because I've historically been very independent. All the gear I get has come from my viewers directly. And then to have an actual manufacturer sending me stuff, that's a different dynamic. And I want to make sure I'm keeping an eye out for undue influence from that. It's nice to get free knives, 100%, but at the same time, I don't want to be in a position where I'm unduly influenced. Like I said, I'm going to go ahead and clean out the pivot holes here just to make sure there's no gunk up inside. So yeah, that's kind of an interesting and different challenge. I think we're now ready to put this knife back together. One thing to point out here, your detent hole goes through and through, so you know, aren't going to want to fill it up with oil because you'll never be able to. And all the parts are here. Everything looks good. Let's put the thing back together. Start off, as usual, by applying the lubrication to the stop pin here. Use that to sort of use the side of this thing to spread that lubrication around, and there goes the freaking bearing race. That's okay. Next step, I'm going to put a little bit of lubrication on the bearing race itself. That'll distribute itself all over that. One thing to note is that there's a D-shaped pivot here. Perfect. And that fits with the D shape on this side. And on this little guy, the D shape actually needs to face towards the back of the knife. So I'm going to make sure and do that, and I'm just going to try and keep that alignment throughout the rest of the disassembly here, or reassembly, I suppose. Next thing, I'm going to drop on a washer. Nice tight tolerance there. And I'm just going to rotate that washer around here, and I'm going to put a little bit of extra oil on there. But my goal here is just to make sure that the balls in the bearing here are all covered in oil, which is good. Next step is going to be to apply a little bit of, since I can't actually put oil into the detent ball hole, I'm going to oil the detent ball slightly. And I'm also going to use the side of this applicator. These little tubes are freaking spectacular. Just to kind of deploy a little bit of this stuff on there. And I'm also going to put a little bit under the blade itself. I'm running this guy wet, but that's okay. I don't mind disassembly, so a little bit of extra lint catching, no big deal. There we go. That's good. Now I'm going to put in the stop pin, the hollow stop pin. If you're a structural engineer or somebody who might actually have an answer for this, I'm very curious. What do you think about having the hollowness there? Is that actually a concern in terms of strength? I'm tempted to say no. The amount of force that's required here isn't much, and it is a tubular object. I mean, sure, it'll be less strong probably than if it were a solid stop pin, but at the same time, is that actually a concern? So many of these things in the knife world suffer from people not understanding the structural forces involved. I don't entirely either. And I've learned a lot from my my engineering friends saying things like, well, Nick, G10 is really strong. Shut the heck up. Or other things. So, oh, there went my bearing race. That's okay. Press everything down here. Now, what's going on here is I think my pivot is popped partially out. And it's always tough to reassemble a knife when the lock bar is fully tensioned. So I'm going to relax this a little bit, and then that kind of lets everything pop together a little bit more. Next step here is going to be to go ahead and throw a little bit of Loctite onto the pivot screw, and I'm using a blue Loctite. Make sure, even though it's in a red tube, it needs to say blue on there. And that just helps me to, as I'm adjusting the pivot, make sure everything stays in place afterwards. I'm just going to kind of put that in vaguely tightly for the moment. No sense really locking it down yet. I'm going to be going back to it anyways. Now I'm going to put in these two back scale screws. Just needed to push the collars into the titanium itself. There we go. Little Loctite on there. Tighten that down. Again, not doing super tightness right now because I don't know how everything's going together. You always want to make sure that you dial in the pivot, get that right before you dial in the scales. In many ways, my life would be easier if my fingertips were magnetic. In many ways, it would be much more difficult. All right, I'm going to go ahead and pop that in there. Now, let's see where we're at here. This pivot is too loose. Yeah, something ain't right here. I just need to tighten up your pivot a little bit, I imagine. Okay, so this is actually designed to run at full tightness from the looks of it. I appreciate that very much. Tends to be a sign of good quality, although there are quality knives that don't have that feature. But when a knife is designed well enough that you can crank the pivot down all the way and it's still going to run just fine. There we go. So, the knife is running, centered. Damn it, Kizer, this is well done. There you go. Shame you can't take it apart because that was easy and pleasurable. And 12 minutes and 52 seconds. Can't argue with that, right? All right, so that's your Kizer Uprising here, and pretty straightforward. Hope you found this at least remotely interesting. And mostly, though, I'm just hoping that you have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.